She'll be talking all things hormonal, nutritional and environmental. Also, Dr. Uwe's here, thanks to Neutrog. And, of course, all great biological fertilisers from Neutrog are available at all good garden and hardware stores. One of those is Vidorlis Garden Centre. And Milton will be here after 9, part of our expert panel. And today to give away 10-kilo bag of Rapid Razor. Michael.
Yes, Uwe, good morning to you.
Good morning and welcome back from the big white continent.
Well, thank you very much indeed. A lot of penguin poo down there.
Is there? Oh, well, maybe we'll have to set up a factory down there.
What would Angus call that?
We already have one called Sea-Doo, so we already have a product like that, so I'm not sure.
There's a lot down there.
Is there, yeah?
All of a sudden, Angus gets down there, looks around.
Yeah,
I can make some penguin poo. Away we go.
Frozen penguin poo. Now, today we're going to... What's the difference between compost and fertiliser?
Well, that's right, because I think a lot of people are sort of... Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are under the misconception that your compost is a fertiliser, when your compost generally isn't. Your compost is what we like to call a soil conditioner. So it's quite different. I mean, if you think about it, when you take your compost and you put on your leaf litter in and your twigs and your weeds and everything, and your kitchen scraps, of course.
Yes.
You actually end up with a mixture that's quite low in nitrogen. I mean, if you think about a compost heap, you might start with 100 kilos worth of compost, and by the time it's completely composted down, you might end up with 30, 20 kilos of good compost. Mm-hmm. So, you lose a lot of the nutrients and you lose a lot of the volume, obviously. So, I mean, the majority of that you lose is carbon dioxide, because that's the bacteria and fungi breaking everything down. So
that's the smell.
And yeah. But in the smell, you actually lose your nutrients, because a lot of the smelly sort of things produced by compost is actually nitrogen compounds. So nitrogen tends to get lost. Nitrogen gets lost a lot in home composting, and that's because what happens is the bacteria are there and they're working away, and some bacteria do the right thing. They'll do exactly what we want them to. They'll convert that nitrogen in the compost into a form that plants can use. But then there's other ones there that'll immediately take that nitrogen and transform it either back into nitrogen gas, so it escapes, or they turn it into nitrogen oxide or nitrous oxide, in which case it also escapes. So what happens is your compost actually, the amount of nitrogen actually drops over time in your compost. So it's not actually something that feeds your plants unless you start to supplement your compost with something like blood and bone or some other source of nitrogen.
Rapid Razor or something.
Rapid Razor. You could put pellets in it, and that will then bring the nitrogen content back up. So compost is fantastic because it does all the other things in your soil. It makes your soil loose. It aerates it. It encourages earthworms, it encourages microbes. So it's a great thing to use, but it shouldn't be used as the sole source of nutrients. I think that's where people get a little bit confused. Yeah.
What's the difference between compost and humus material?
So the
question without notice.
No, that's fine. No. So humus is a really interesting subject. A lot of people have difficulty understanding what humus is. So compost is generally contains humus in it, or humic substances, and essentially what humus is if you were to leave your compost for years and years and just keep turning it, what essentially happens is that the leftover material that can't be broken down any further by your bacteria and your fungi, that effectively becomes humus. And humus is a really interesting I guess a substance, so to speak, because what it does, it has a fantastic ability to hold on to nutrients. That's one of the big things that humus does, and that's because it has a negative charge. It becomes negatively charged. So all those things that normally get leached through your soil, like iron, manganese, zinc, all those things we continually put out as micronutrients, they normally get leached out of the soil. So if you have humus there, they capture that. And they capture and release all the time. And when they release it, the plants can take it up. And then any excess, they recapture. So humus is sort of this final stage of really long stage composting.
It's a concentrated.
It's a concentrated. Yep. I like to sort of refer it as the bacterial and the fungal poop. It's the stuff that basically bacteria and fungi can't break down.
Okay.
So it's compost, and then if you leave it, you end up with humus. Yeah.
Can you get it on its own?
You can get humic substances. You can buy various forms of humates or humics. Brown coal is a really good source, for example. So if you have something like sea mungus, it has quite a lot of humus in it from Neutrog. So brown coal is a common one that is used. And that has, I think I can't remember now, we did an analysis, but it's got a very high percentage of humus or humic substances. But it is something that you can't sort of like just buy over the counter.
No.
You have to
a bag of humus, please.
Yeah, exactly. It would be extremely expensive if you
get
had
a
one.
humus to eat.
Hummus.
Yes,
As Ruka would say. Hummus.
So yeah, it's not
Don't
the
get it
sort of
mixed
thing.
up.
Yeah, not the sort of thing you can just buy off the shelf easily. Not in the form that we would normally think about it. But
So if any of our listeners are interested in getting humus in their
soil. Yep.
best way is to say, like, rapid raiser, that's got some in.
That's got some in, yeah. But, you know, I mean, if our product that has probably the most is sea mungus.
Sea mungus.
Our sea mungus pellets have a reasonable amount of humus. And that, I mean, I think that's one of the nice things about it is that it has those seaweed extracts in it. Which are great for, you know, protecting plants against heat and stress. But the nice thing is it's got those humic substances in it, so that traps those nutrients.
Neither are fertilisers.
Neither are truly fertilisers.
Fertilisers.
Yeah. I mean, sea mungus does have about 2.5% nitrogen, about 2% potassium, 2% phosphate, and all the micronutrients. So I use that as my fertiliser. I use that as my fertiliser, especially in summer when I'm not looking for massive growth. What I'm looking for is plants to recover after the heat. So I normally put out something like sea mungus. And also I like to put that out early in summer because I find it does a great job holding on to water and tends to reduce some of that water repellency in the soil. So that's my go-to summer fertiliser. And then in spring and in autumn I use something else that's got a bit more oomph to it, something like Rapid Razor or one of the chemically boosted ones. Like, you know, for your fruit trees you might use Gigantic or something like that.
So you can have compost, which is great for your soil.
Fantastic,
But you do need to follow up with the...
That's right, yep.
fertiliser.
I think the old adage always was that compost feeds the soil, whereas fertiliser feeds your plants. So, and I think people need to think about that. And that, I mean, I'm a big fan of compost. I compost my own material in the garden, not as successfully as perhaps I should, considering I work for a company that makes a lot of material.
Well,
but
you get a busted bag every now and then.
Yeah, well, that's right, yeah, exactly.
Drop the old Stanley knife.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, not another one. But certainly, you know, it's something people should be doing. It's a great way of recycling your scraps, a great way to stop things from going to landfill. So, you know, it is fantastic. But people do need to be aware that if you do put compost out, make sure it's well composted because, as I said, there's a level of nitrogen that's used by the bacteria to break that material down. So if you put your compost out too early, the bacteria will just simply grab that nitrogen out of the soil. So your plants will end up getting yellow, and we call that nitrogen drawdown. So, you know, be assured that your compost is broken down properly. A lot of people just go, it looks about right. It's been out there for 6 months. Yeah, I'll just spread it.
But, of course, all this has been sort of shortcut a bit from the home gardener now, hasn't it? Because we've got these green bins.
That's right, yep.
So that's the sort of the mega side of the industry, isn't it?
That's right, yep.
You can do a little bit of composting home with your bin, but for a lot of people that's not possible, or
that's
they haven't got space or time or whatever. So now the green bin takes over, that then goes out to a big composter like Jeffrey's or Pete's.
Yep, exactly.
Process.
Yeah, so they process separately. I mean, I've got a couple of good sized bays I can compost in. I should have built 3, but I only built 2, which is again early on in my life. I built these probably about 25 years ago. What's left of them, what the white ants haven't eaten because they were surrounded by wooden sleepers.
Oh, right, yeah.
But I should have built 3, but I sort of ran out of room, and now I regret it because 3. If you're going to compost, 3 compost bays are ideal. You know, for your fresh material, then for your material that you've turned the first time, and then the second time you can put in. Every pile shrinks and becomes less and less. But you'll still get some good compost out to put on my veggie patch and enrich.
But that process in the home garden is not that common these days, is it? Not even 10 years ago. No.
I guess people use those Tumble composters.
Yeah, yep.
They can be quite quite good. I mean, the thing about the tumble composters is you do have to be a little bit aware of the moisture level in those. If you put a lot of wet material in, what you end up with is with little balls of stuff that doesn't break down, and it can be quite smelly. So that's one where you have to end up putting shredded newspaper in. So I actually find it easier to compost in a bay.
In a bay.
But the tumble composters or those compost bins, they do work quite well. So, certainly an alternative if you don't have the space.
I remember going back in the 60s, everyone had one, a bin.
Yep.
Compost bin, a guidey compost bin. He must have made a fortune, that guy.
Yeah.
I've still got two big black
Big
ones
black,
that I've
yep.
turned into garden beds now.
Yeah. Oh, no, my dad still has a compost bin. He'll put stuff in and then, shovel stuff out from the bottom and put more stuff in the top. And
Well, the kids have got the rotating one at school.
Yeah.
But I think they just like to turn it.
Turn it,
So
yeah.
it's just constantly turning all the time. And you're right. If they put stuff in there and leave it, woof, they can have some smell.
They do work very quickly because you get a lot of air through the system, and that's about composting. If you can get a lot of air through it, it composts very quickly. But the thing about those small bins is that they often don't get up to temperature, so they don't inactivate your weed seeds, which is
What
a
are you
problem.
looking at, 80 or something?
Well, we're like 55 degrees
55.
for at least a couple of weeks to inactivate all the seeds. And the other thing is, again, talking from my own experiences, if my compost doesn't quite get up to temperature, then I put it out in the veggie patch, and then all of a sudden I've got pumpkins growing and cucumbers and watermelons, and I'm going, hang on a minute, I'm trying to grow radishes here, and that's because the
Hang on,
seed-
I'm a scientist. What's going wrong?
Well, that's a big radish. But you live and learn, and it's a great thing. I mean, it's good fun.
Yui, thanks for coming in.
No problem.
We've worked out now the difference between compost and fertiliser. What did you say? Compost to soil and
Compost,
feed, fertilise your plants.
That's right. Compost feeds the soil, and
Keep that, you can't go
fertiliser
wrong.
feeds the
That
plants.
is a good line. If
Buy
people
some
want to
seed
find out
makers.
more from you at Neutrog,
info@neutrog.com or follow us on our Facebook page. Easy enough.
Thank you, Yui. Thank you very
problems.
much indeed.
yes, and
You up
stay-
to speed on all that now?
I'm all over
You
that.
just- oh.
I just turn that rotating thing at the kids' school like I'm in bingo. Just keep turning those balls. Neutrog biological fertilisers at all good garden and hardware stores. Neutrog.com.au. Listen up, because before 10 o'clock, your chance to take away a 10-kilo bag of Rapid Razor. And the doors are closed today, so you had to lug that up the stairs. So thanks for doing that.
No problem.
A little bit of a Sunday morning workout. Short break, 10 to 8. Your call's next.